Well, Steve, it is fun to you and I get to have a lot of offline conversations where it's just you and I talking all things leadership and business and so forth. But it's fun to sit down today on the podcast. So welcome. I'm glad you're making the time.
Thanks, Jenny. It's an honor to be here with you, and I love when we dive into this conversation because I know we think a lot alike.
We do. We usually you and I have an agenda that we're getting to whenever we're in discussion, and then it's like, but we need to actually get some more time to talk about that. So this is probably just what our listeners are going to get to appreciate is like sitting in on a good like catch up conversation for you and I in some ways.
Yeah, no, it'll be fun, and we just have to make sure we don't go down rabbit trails and talk about the cost of housing and construction and things like that because I know we go all over the place whenever we talk.
I was going to say that's exactly right. Like,
Yeah,
oh wait, let's talk about that. Let's talk about
yeah.
this. Maybe to get us started, give us a little bit of your career journey, your leadership journey. Give everybody a bit of your backstory.
Yeah, so I started my career when I graduated from the University of Georgia. Go Dogs!
Uh-huh. I knew you did that on
I'm going to
purpose.
get that plug in there. Yeah, so I started in real estate. Actually, started a company with a good friend, and we were doing real estate on the retail sales side. We got into a little bit of development and construction, and so I did that for about 12 years, and that's where I had my first opportunity to lead a team because I kind of led the real estate agents
Okay.
on the residential side, and then I got out of that work and ended up in the dot-com world in the late 90s in Southern California. And basically that kind of began this journey for me where I was working as a sales producer or a sales consultant for a lot of these emerging growth tech companies or professional services companies. And then along the way, I got connected with the owners of Church Community Builder, and I got an opportunity to come in there early stage. I was employee number 11 there with CCB
Hmm.
in 2007, and I was there for gosh 8 9 years, I guess.
Which is
And
when
that's
we
the
first connected, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think I was at CCB when we first met.
Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you were, I think it was when you were at Crosspoint.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say, I
Yeah.
feel like we first connected when I was back at Crosspoint in Nashville, and I'm thinking you were. It's funny, like you get enough history with friends over time, and you're like, when did we actually meet? But I'm pretty sure you were at CCB at the time.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I know that's right. I feel like it was Ben Stroup or Ron Edmondson that connected us. Somebody else,
That
some
sounds
other
exactly
Nashville
right.
influencer. So
That's great.
yeah. But so at CCB, Jenny, that was really the first time that I got to, other than that period of time in real estate, that was when I had the opportunity to actually build and lead a team again, because I'd always
Mm,
been a producer.
yeah.
Um, and so I got to build a team at CCB. The sales team reported to me, marketing reported to me, and then it kind of grew from there. And so that's where I really shifted from being a producer to a leader.
Mm,
And it was a whole new experience for me. And one that I really enjoyed, actually surprisingly enjoyed more than I thought I would. And so that really kind of shifted my thinking in terms of my career. And I actually started thinking about, hey, one day when the timing is right, I want to go back to leading my own company again and
hmm.
building a team kind of the way I'd love to do it. And so that's where I am today, getting a chance to do that. So riding the crazy entrepreneur roller coaster.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
Yeah,
which you and I were both talking about before we started the podcast of like the crazy entrepreneurial roller coaster. It
yeah,
is a wild ride, but
it
it's
is
ty-
real.
typically fun, sometimes scary.
Yeah,
All of
that's
the
right.
roller coaster things apply.
That's
So
right. It's a great analogy.
it's so good. So
Yeah.
tell everybody a little bit about your company Altezza, just to give them framework of what you could do now.
Well, yeah, thanks, Jenny. So, because my entire career has been in sales, it made sense that if I started a company, I would focus on sales. And so
Yeah.
we're a fractional sales company that comes alongside small businesses that are trying to scale and
Hmm.
help them to accelerate sales in a really affordable way by matching them up with experienced salespeople on a fractional or part-time basis instead of them having to invest in that position full time. Yeah, so I personally have a passion to help small business owners get to that place where they can see the business really take off, and where they can themselves work on the business instead of in it. And sales is often the thing that really keeps them from doing that most of the time. So it's a lot of fun, and it's right in the center of my personal passion, which is always good.
I love that so much. And we get to work together because Foresight partners with Altezza, and it is that that ability to I don't know how to do sales. I was mostly in ministry work and did some corporate work before that, but I wasn't directly in sales. And so just that, and we'll get to this because I think one of the things that I appreciate so much about you is just your outlook on that, because I think some people hear sales and are like, ooh. And
Yeah.
even as a leader of my organization, I was a little resistant to that. Well, how, this whole sales dynamic, how do you do that? And, because I think so many times we have a bad experience with that, but that posture and that attitude of really serving and helping connect people with the appropriate need. I think you've probably helped shift some of my thinking on that over the years, but I probably should let you expand upon that. I've got a couple other things I want to ask you about, but I'll let you respond to that because I know you have a heart and passion for how you approach the sales function.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jenny. I think, the reason that we all have that kind of icky feeling about it is because we've all worked with that salesperson that is icky. Like they
Yes.
just are terrible at it, and they just make us feel awful. And they're just not good. And so we've all had that experience and we don't want to be that person. So that, and we just sort of associate it, unfortunately, with sales. But to your point, sales is really, at the end of the day, if we are selling the right way, it's about serving people. It's
Yeah.
about solving their problems and serving them and helping them achieve what they're trying to achieve. And that's, that if we do that, that is the best way to sell. That's actually the most successful way to do it. And it doesn't feel icky at all.
Yeah.
And what most of us don't realize is we do that all the time in all these other areas of our life. It's just that when we apply that into the business context is when it gets squeamish.
Yeah. Well, and again, I wrestled with that starting our company and working so much with churches and nonprofits and small businesses. And that realization that, oh, if I feel like there's a passion and there's a gifting that I have by way of helping coach leaders and build great teams, well, there are organizations that's the exact support they need. And so, it's much about connecting the dots and figuring out how can we take what we do and serve others well in that. And I think being able to look at it through that lens really helped equip me to go, oh, this is not an icky thing. This is being intentional to say, how can we connect the right dots and serve people well with the
Yeah.
work that we're gifted to do. So I love
Amen.
that.
That's great. Yeah. Love it.
I want to go back to something you said a minute ago when you were talking about CCB and, just that realization that you moved from being a producer to a leader and how
Uh-huh.
that kind of surprised you and how you enjoyed that. Will you talk a little bit about that? Because I think we run into this so much that we're working with leaders and teams. And I was working with a team literally this morning. We were debriefing their culture survey. And we identified that, we've got kind of I don't love the word middle management, but it basically that middle tier of leaders. It's we recognize we've got a development gap there, people who have more recently been promoted into leadership and they've been producers. They've been experts in their area. And now they've been promoted into leadership to lead a team. And we're noticing gaps there.
Yeah.
And this happens over and over and over again, because it's for that person who's been promoted, it's a shift in priorities and responsibility and perspective.
Yeah.
And if they're not equipped for that, it can be really frustrating. So you hinted at that, and I'd love for you to unpack what that looked like for you.
Yeah, it's that's a great topic that you could spend a lot of time peeling back, right?
Right.
And in the sales world, it is really common to take your top producer and
Yeah.
then turn them into a sales manager. You see it happen all the time, and I don't know what the percentages are, but it's a high percentage of the time it doesn't work well.
Mm-hmm.
And for me personally, I think I was nervous about it, and because of that dynamic, because I was familiar with it, and I didn't know if I had what it took. And honestly, I felt like I made a lot of mistakes when I was leading that real estate team
Mm.
in my 20s, and so I was kind of thinking about the baggage from that experience. But what happened for me as I kind of entered into it is I realized that, this juice and this adrenaline rush that I got from closing a deal
Hmm.
actually began to become even more pervasive for me when I was helping somebody else do it.
Ah,
So as I was helping my team be successful, reach their goals, that was giving me more fulfillment than me closing a deal.
I
And
love
that
that.
was the part that was unexpected. I
Hmm.
did not see that coming, but
Yeah.
I was really excited about it. And so I don't know, like there's got to, you probably, better than I do about personalities and how we're wired, right? So there's
Hmm.
obviously something in me, some way that God wired me that made that true for me.
Yeah.
But that just was so much more life-giving to be empowering and helping a team and helping that team be successful, much more so than it was about me being successful.
Well, I love that so much because that's one of the things that I think I stumbled upon accidentally too in my early leadership journey. But it's the perspective shift. I talk a lot about the perspective shifts leaders have to make to lead better. And that's one of them, that it's like when you move into responsibilities of actually leading a team, the perspective of my greatest work now is done through this team rather than the work that I personally do. Like if I
Yeah.
can find more value in what happens through the work of the team, and that's more life-giving, then I think you've started to really make that shift to really thinking like a leader. And but I mean it takes work, right? Sometimes it sneaks up on you, sometimes you learn it the hard way, but that willingness to recognize, oh, it's so much more fulfilling when we get to do that work through others. And or I think there's also a realization that some people are individual contributors and they're really good at that.
Yeah.
And if putting them in a position where they're not able to do that, um it what we find all the time is people get promoted into that, and either they're not equipped with the understanding of it, and or they really do enjoy being an individual contributor because they're really dynamic at the thing they do. Then that's sometimes a good indicator of, hey, should you be leading a team or should you be doing this thing over here that you're really exceptional at?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true. And being able to assess that is obviously super important, before we elevate somebody into that leadership role. I would say too that for me, Jenny, part of my journey as a producer,
Mm-hmm.
working for these companies that I work for between the chapter in real estate and the chapter at CCB, I unfortunately got to experience a lot of bad leadership.
Mm.
And so I feel like that probably planted some seeds in me that when it was my turn to be a leader, I was like, okay, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know what I'm not going to do,
Yes. Yep. Yep.
you know,
Exactly. Yep.
but it motivated me because I felt, I wanted to be a good leader because I'd had so many leaders that weren't good.
Yeah, that's really good. Steve, one of the things that I've always admired about you is that I experience you as somebody who tends to lead relationally. Like
Mm.
you just are really intentional about relationships and connecting with people. I'd love for you to speak to that a little bit. Maybe why it's important to you. Was it natural? Was it something that you kind of learned in your leadership journey? I'd just love for you to speak to that a bit.
Yeah, I feel like so part of it's just wiring. So I am just wired as a relational person
Hmm.
naturally. I've always been that way. And so that there's part of it that's just inherent, right? I just like that. But then again, going back to what I was just saying, having experienced leadership personally that invested in and valued me,
Hmm.
I just noticed the difference. I mean, it was a stark difference between working under a leader who invested relationally and valued me versus one that didn't.
Yeah.
And in the first example, in that relational, when the leader does that well, you feel valued, you feel cared for, and then that in turn makes you want to do, I mean, you just are motivated to do a much better job, right? Because
That's right.
you go to the mat for a leader like that. They don't even have to ask you.
Yeah.
because you feel like they care about you, right? And in the
Mhm.
other scenario, you just feel like a commodity. You're just a means to an end for somebody. And in that case, you just feel demotivated. That's kind of best case scenario. You feel demotivated. The worst case scenario is you feel resentful and ticked off, you know?
That's right. Yeah.
So having experienced that, and then coupled with my just natural, desire to be relational, I think that's how I ended up being that kind of a leader.
Yeah. What do you say to people that, so for me, and a lot of the listeners will know this because when I talk about the four dimensions of leading with heart, soul, mind, and strength, I always talk about how for years I was called heartless as a leader because that is like, I'm such a task driven person that like the
Yeah.
relational side was a learning edge for me and still is, I have to be really conscientious of that. How how do you encourage people that are wired a little more like me, that especially like a young leader who's coming up and you see that driven task nature, they are like they're hungry to, do the thing, accomplish their goals, etc. How do you encourage them to find value in that relational side of leadership?
Well, I think there's a couple of thoughts that come to mind for me, Jenny. First of all, I had to be intentional about doing it myself, right? So
Hmm.
just being naturally relational didn't mean that I was actually going to do it in the right way. And so I had to schedule time and make sure that I had time in the calendar for those people that I lead to not just talk about business,
Yeah.
but to actually connect relationally,
Yeah.
whether that be going to lunch or coffee or whatever, we're just going to hang so I can get to know you and your family. I did that. I naturally wanted to do that out of my relational style. So for the person who isn't naturally wired that way, and I had people like that working for me who then led people as well.
Yeah.
And I think of one guy in particular, and literally it was just like helping him understand the impact that he was having on his people.
That's right.
And so I would literally be like in conversations, watching a conversation happening where he's interfacing with one of the people that he leads, and seeing the something that he says to him, and you could just see the spirit just kind of leaving him.
Yeah.
And so then I would take him in the moment. I would just kind of pull him aside and say, "Hey, let's talk
That's
about
good.
that," and just coach him up and help him see it. And what I learned in that process is that, yeah, those people that aren't wired that way doesn't mean that they don't care about it. Like,
That's
they
right.
want to be good at it. It doesn't come natural for them. So if you're coaching them and helping them to kind of see where they make a difference, where they impact people by the things they say or do, then you can give them real practical coaching on how to improve that. And most
Yes.
people want to, unless they're just total jerks, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right in that a lot of times it's not it's not that they don't care. It's that again, some of their just their instincts, don't lend themselves to making the space or the time for that. And so I love that, just noticing those moments and then coaching those specific moments. I mean, I think that's just a healthy coaching practice in general, is like, hey, like notice something in the moment and give good feedback, good and constructive, right?
Yeah,
Like coach the things where somebody does that really well. And then
yeah,
also coach for the, hey, I wondered if you noticed this
yeah.
in that interaction, or, just, is there another way we could have approached that might have helped that person receive that better? Or, and those coaching questions are just so powerful. So,
Yeah, yeah, and in the moment is really important, or at least as close to the moment as possible, right? Because then it's fresh
yeah.
for everybody, including you when you're coaching them. So sometimes that's hard to do, but if you can do it close to the moment, that helps as well.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Steve, talk about what are some of the other values that have shaped your leadership journey? Like what has helped you succeed as a leader?
So are you talking about like other values that I've seen in other leaders that have been helpful?
Maybe in that, or in yourself, even things that, you just hold really important, have become important in your leadership journey.
Okay, yeah. And I would say those are connected, right? I would say that I've seen these qualities in the leaders that I admire. And so then I've tried to emulate them, and I value them in myself, in my own leadership. And so, other than the ones we've talked about, I'd say humility, humility, clarity, and patience would be
Mm,
three that really kind of stand out for me as being things that I want to, they're almost like non-negotiable for me. So, and when I say humility, I'll kind of unpack each one. It's about being open-minded and teachable.
mhm.
So as leaders, the more experience we have, the easier it is for us to think we have all the answers. And so I think I've always appreciated leaders who always seek wisdom and always seek counsel from the people that they lead, you
That's
know.
good.
And then even if I choose a different path than the feedback that they've given me, I always want to make sure that they've felt valued and heard in that
Hmm.
process.
Hmm.
And I want to do that. So I think that's how I would define the humility piece, is just always being willing to learn from those that you lead.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, clarity would be the second one. And I think, gosh, one of the big topics right now is, compassionate leadership and inclusive leadership and all these. There's a lot of these things going on right now that feel really soft, I think, to a lot of leaders. Like, oh, that sounds weak. It feels like I'm having to coddle people, and so this whole concept of compassionate leadership, I think, is really about just being a leader who cares. And I think clarity is a huge piece of that, right?
Yeah.
Because if we can give the people that we lead full clarity on what it is that they do, their role and how that fits into the bigger picture, what are the expectations we have, and
Hmm.
how are we gonna manage accountability? What does that look like?
Yeah,
You know what? People actually feel really cared for. Like
that's true.
that is caring for people. If I care
Yeah.
about you and we're friends, I'm going to try to be as clear as possible on, if something's going sideways in our relationship, we're going to fix that. And we're going to
Yep.
fix that by being clear what happened. Well, we need to do that in our work relationships too. And that clarity makes people feel cared for. So it's not about coddling, it's about being
Hmm.
clear, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I love that one because we talk about that a lot in the culture framework, that the organizational clarity actually creates like a healthy foundation for culture to flourish, right? Where we
Yeah.
leave things confusing and muddled is where people, where we start to see fractures in healthy culture.
Oh my
So,
gosh, ambiguity is the worst thing. It just, people get stressed with ambiguity, and it just, if you let people live there, it sets them up for failure. So
yeah. Yeah, that's
yeah,
exactly right.
100%.
It's good.
And then that third one, the patience piece, I think
Uh-huh.
that's probably rooted in my experience in sales more than anything, because I think, unfortunately, in the world of sales, there's not a lot of patience, right?
Mm.
People, they hire salespeople, they expect immediate results, and if they don't get it, then they churn and burn through those people. And so I've lived in that world my whole life, so that's probably where this is rooted for me.
Yeah.
But I see this play out in other areas too, where as leaders, we bring people in, we set those expectations and goals, and then we have to provide tools and framework for people to be successful. And then you got to give it some breathing room, right?
Hmm.
Because things don't happen just overnight.
That's right.
And so many times, leaders, I think in our impatience, we will expect too much too soon,
Yeah.
and not really sit down and have conversations about what's reasonable in terms of the time it takes to find a groove, and reach the
Yeah.
goal. So yeah, I think
That's
that's another
good.
piece of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And leaders are notoriously impatient.
Well, and now that I own my own company, I'm doing that myself. Now I'm being that guy. So I
Well,
get,
yeah, yeah, right. Um,
yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say that was gonna be my next question for you too, because starting your own company, you've really moved into that founder leader role. And I'm curious what you're learning, what's different in having to be in the first chair, as opposed to second chair seats.
Yeah, well, there's the patience thing that we just talked about.
Yep, there's
So
that.
now I understand the pressure of that from the other perspective, and so I have a new appreciation for it, for sure.
Yeah,
I would say I definitely feel the weight of the financial weight, right?
yeah.
Financial risks and realities that founders wrestle with is absolutely crystal clear to me now, and I know that wasn't always the case. Sitting in the producer seat as an employee or what have you, you just don't. You're not as close to it. You don't know. so you don't feel that weight. So I feel that weight. And honestly, I'm trying to figure out what's an appropriate way to convey that to a team so
Mm-hmm.
that they don't feel, I don't want them to feel weird or guilty about it, but I don't want them to not realize that it's there too. Like there's
Yeah.
realities, right? So
Yep.
I'm still wrestling with that piece for sure.
Yeah.
Would welcome any input you have about that.
It's,
Um,
same place, same place. But
yeah,
it is, I tell a lot of like the leaders that I get to work with, particularly if I'm working with senior pastors or founders of organizations, like once I moved into being the leader of my own organization, even though like for years I was in a second chair, I was the one like writing all the checks and
yeah,
seeing all the stuff, but the weight of being in the first chair, it is different. And there's alerting in that. And then to your point, like how do you appropriately bring people into that to own it with you, but not put undue burden on them? Because there is that, that is part of the weight you carry in a first chair seat is,
yeah,
some of those pieces of the puzzle. So I think
yeah,
that's one of those tensions to manage things of how do you appropriately own it and yet bring the right people in to shoulder it with you.
yeah, yeah.
So I think we have
Absolutely.
to maybe somebody wiser than us will follow up and tell us, here's how
Do
you do
another
that.
podcast on that one, would you?
Right, right,
Yeah,
right. Yes.
yeah.
That would be a
And
fun one to do with a bunch of founding leaders. Like,
yeah, it
how
would.
have you navigated this?
Yeah,
So that's good.
yeah, that would be. I'd say the other thing would be that my blind spots are just like immediately apparent. When you're in the first chair, right, and it's all on you, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do that, or I'm really bad at that. It's like the blind spots become really evident really
Yes.
fast. So
Really glaring.
yeah, and so I just have to know I got to close those things as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's really good. Or you
yeah.
be stubborn like me and like, I got to figure it out, which is not always the wisest decision.
Yeah, I think for me again, because I'm wired this way, I have absolutely no interest in engaging in my blind spots, and so I don't want to figure it out.
See, I appreciate that about you because there's a part of me that will feel like I should figure this out. And I have to really wrestle that because I'll feel like I should be able to figure it out. And then that's not always the best. It's not always the best way to solve it. And,
Yeah,
and so, um,
yeah,
so I have
yeah.
to, I have to work through that. Okay. Quick other question for you. What are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing leaders navigate right now? So you work with a lot of different business leaders. You've worked in the nonprofit and church space historically, but what are you noticing right now? What are some of the big things you're seeing leaders deal with?
Oh man, this is easy, and I'm sure you see it too. And it's the whole work-life balance thing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
over and over and over again, that comes up, and it's in both contexts, the business and the ministry context.
Mm-hmm.
So this concept of, how do I find, that balance between the two? How do I integrate them? How does purpose drive all of that? I just see leaders wrestling with that in a big way, and then I have
Yeah.
friends who coach around that, and their businesses are blowing up because so many people need help, you know.
It's like
People
none
need,
of us know how to do this anymore.
yeah, and I think, it was already there before the pandemic, and like so many other things, when a crisis happens, it just accelerates stuff that was already happening. And so
Yeah.
I think that just got accelerated, and I don't feel like we've been able to find the new groove on the other side of it. I feel like we're all kind of still there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that would be the number one. I'd say the second one, again, very common, is the challenge of attracting and retaining good talent.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just much different and much harder to do that these days.
Yeah. Well, and those, in some ways, they kind of go hand in hand in that what we're seeing a little bit is the great resignation and the grass must be greener over there because I'm feeling the work-life balance issues. I'm like, oh, there must be a better opportunity over here. And then we're starting to see the boomerang effect of people going, oh, I jumped to this new thing and I'm realizing it actually wasn't any better, because
Yeah.
most of the time, I mean, all the time, I'm taking me with me. And so if it was a work-life balance issue, in some cases, yes, you transitioned because the company or organization you're a part of wasn't as healthy and you moved to something better. But in a lot of cases, we thought it was the job, and what we're discovering is it was all the pressure of, like you said, we were already dealing with work-life balance stuff because of, due in large part to technology, and the pandemic accelerates that. We all have this flexibility to work from home, which only created more complexity for figuring out how to balance it all.
Yeah. Right.
And so anyway, so there's an interesting correlation that I'm seeing in some of that too, that attracting some of that talent, they're on this hunt for this elusive work-life balance and perfect work-life situation. And that's really hard. And I'm seeing it show up in a lot of the surveys we're doing with on culture for teams, of that, just the level of exhaustion because of that struggle for work-life balance.
Yeah.
Showing up a
Yeah.
lot for teams.
It's a big deal. I think we've forgotten how to disconnect and decompress.
Yeah.
And like you said, because a lot of us are working at home, it makes it even harder because, my commute is just right down the stairs here, and so it's easy for
Yeah.
me to kind of dip into the office and
Yep.
go check that email or whatever. And so I never fully disconnect from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not good. It's not
Yeah.
good. So,
Yeah. It's super, it is, I think it's one of the greatest challenges for us right now is figuring that out, and how to make those my husband and I were having this conversation this week, because he's usually the one that's trying to help keep me in check on work-life balance stuff. Like, hey, what are you doing? Are you working? Today's supposed to be a day off. And then right now the roles are reversed because he's in a really big project that he's working on. And I said to him this weekend, I was like, you really didn't disconnect from that very well this weekend. I was like, I feel like the roles are kind of reversed on this one, but it's like, we're all, juggling so many different things, and it's hard sometimes to find those healthy practices that help you disconnect. I'm springing this one on you, Steve, but have you found some helpful behaviors or triggers that do help you balance that? Because again, especially when you're launching your own business, and working from home, I think you do have to I feel like I was forced to figure a few of those things out 6 years ago when I launched Foresight.
Yeah.
And that served me well through COVID, even though it's you still have to keep learning it. But I'd be curious, just some good practices that you've engaged.
I just need Tara to put a margarita in my hand at about 5 o'clock, and
That does it.
that's all I need. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, I mean
fantastic.
that's cure. Margaritas cure all that ails us, right? So
I love it. Mine is, I don't let myself have snacks at my desk or in the vicinity. And so if I need something to drink, or I'm just getting hungry, I'm like, well, I get, hangry is a real thing for me. So I'm like,
oh yeah,
the clock is ticking and I don't let myself have snacks up here on my office. So I'm like, I got to take a break.
I need to practice that too, because clearly I'm getting larger on this Zoom screen every time I see myself. But
oh my gosh, that's great.
So practical, real life stuff. That although the margarita is real life, but this is what I in my schedule. So I have Wednesday mornings from the time I wake up until lunchtime. Mm-hmm. No meetings. That's nothing can be in that spot, and I use that for reading, listening to podcasts, writing. I'll write, I'll spend some time creating content, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And that is a really helpful break in the routine for me in the middle of the week. Mm-hmm. And the early mornings are kind of that's my power time. And so that coupled with Fridays, again, no meetings on Fridays. And I kind of use Friday to clean up from the week, and I try to be done midday if at all possible, so that I can begin my weekend. And then I trust Tara to take care of the rest in terms of either the margarita, the plans that we have for the weekend. But those are things that are like in my schedule every
Smart.
single week. And then personally, just making sure I put time on the calendar to get away and do retreats
Yeah.
by myself sometimes, and then with family and loved ones other times. But I have to have those retreats built in each quarter of the year. Otherwise, I'm just going to go over the edge.
Yeah. No,
So,
that's so good. And I think, again, sometimes as leaders, we sacrifice the things that bring us life because we feel like we should do, like all these things that are expected of us. I similarly, my morning routine is pretty rigid, simply because I'm an introvert by nature. I need quiet time. I need to exercise. I need fresh air. I and like, just before I engage with people, I've got to make sure I've had good, thoughtful, reflective, like, time. And so it's like, I'm not going to open my phone. I'm not going to open my email. If my husband asks me a work question, I get irritated because I'm like, I'm not in work mode yet. Like, it's like, I've like created this like little mental block that it's like, I can't do that yet. It's not time for that yet. But I
yeah.
think trying to, and obviously there are exceptions, depending on what I've got going on, but by and large, like really protecting. So I love that you have those blocks of time in your schedule too, that you're like, no, those are protected because that's what actually helps me rejuvenate and contribute my best to
Yeah.
the company.
Yeah, and I don't know about you. You may be good at doing this yourself. I need help. I have someone who protects me from sabotaging myself because I'll be tempted,
Yes.
an important call, that I need to do, and I'll be tempted to put it in one of those spots. And so
Yes.
I need someone to not let that happen.
I was going to say, I try to be accountable to my teammates of, hey, here's what I'm doing and here's why these places are blocked.
Yeah.
And, like, don't let me book over these things. Like, so there's somebody I have to like kind of tell if I'm about to violate some of those
Yeah.
boundaries in my calendar.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's
Yep.
really good.
Gotta
Okay.
have a camp partner.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question for you. I know we're running a little long, but this is good. What's one of the biggest mistakes that you see leaders make, especially when they're stressed or uncertain? I feel like so many leaders are living in that stressed and uncertain place. And I'm curious what you notice. What are some of the mistakes we're making?
Yeah, and okay, so this first one this is one of my challenges, but I see others that do this as well. But it's definitely one of mine, and that is when I get stressed or I'm just really tapped out energy wise, my communication style tends to become more direct
Mm,
and less caring and compassionate. Like I just get super direct with
yeah.
people
Yeah.
in a way that can become hurtful, actually. And so I think a lot of leaders have to be careful of that.
That's good.
Is
Yeah.
just taking a breath, before we speak, and just watching how we communicate. Um, and then the opposite of that would be the silent treatment, not talking at all, just kind of going into their cave. And that's not helpful either, you
Yes.
know. So those are mistakes I see a lot. The other one would be just total gridlock in decision making. It's just
Mm,
they freeze.
yeah.
Instead of moving forward. And I feel like that's rooted oftentimes, and I'm playing, psychiatrist here, so forgive me for that. But I think it's rooted a lot in a scarcity mentality more
Yeah.
than an abundance mentality. And I think
Yeah.
that when we're stressed, I think that's naturally our brain goes into, we get problem focused instead of solution focused, and that creates that scarcity mentality. And
Yeah.
oftentimes the outcome of that is we just stop, like we just like freeze in our tracks and don't do anything. And
Yeah.
I see that happening a lot. So,
Yeah. That's good. And I think there's um, what we were talking before we started recording of just like trying to anticipate, okay, what's coming ahead in 2023? I mean, you
mhm,
read the news and you read stuff and it's like, it's kind of all over the map. And there's a tendency for us as leaders to like, you know, um, to to freeze, to like, get fearful of the unknown and what's coming. Um, and I think that's a healthy and helpful reminder that that tendency is to shut down, when in fact that's when our leadership is often needed most, right? To be like looking for the perspective and give and hope and trying to anticipate and and keep moving forward. I had one coach one time tell me, just accelerate through the hard thing, not like kamikaze accelerate, but like, but like, but like, don't stop, I think is what they were saying to me is, hey, don't stop, don't freeze, don't play it safe, don't be scared, like be smart, be thoughtful, bring good wisdom and counselors into the mix on, where you're going and the decisions that need to be made, but, keep moving forward. And I always think about that, because I think I have that tendency to just want to freeze when I'm uncertain.
I mean, it's obviously kind of a human nature thing, right? I guess, but I think about this especially, in the context of our faith. Yeah, it's like as a Christ follower, man, how can I do that? Mm-hmm. How can I just stop instead of just taking the next step and just trusting God? Take the next step, but keep moving. Trust God. This is, regardless of what happens, there's going to be good that comes out of it. And I have to remember that in those times. And for some reason, even us as believers, we get caught up in the fear that gets, pummeled on us every day from all the stuff, all the information that we have to process. So,
that's exactly right. Oh, Steve, this is fun. We could have probably kept following a lot of rabbit trails and fun discussion, but thank you so much for joining me and digging in and just helping encourage leaders today. This is so good. I know people would love to hear, how can they connect more with you? Where can we go to connect more with you?
Well, I've only got one social media platform that I use, and that's LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. And so that's absolutely the best place to connect with me is on LinkedIn. Whether you want to talk leadership or business or whatever, that's the place to do it.
That's the place. Awesome. We'll make sure we connect to that, link to that in the show notes too. So Steve, thank you so much. Thanks for your friendship, your support and coaching for me through the years, just as a friend and fellow leader. And thanks for all you're doing to support businesses and leaders in their work. Your generosity and heart is always a big encouragement. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate you.